Hey everyone, Dan Johnston here. I'm the Jack of all Ministries, and today we're going to be answering the question, is green glue really worth it? If you're watching this, there's a good chance that you're doing some kind of a soundproofing project yourself. Like maybe you're trying to soundproof your walls so you don't have to hear your noisy neighbor with an adjoining wall. Or maybe you're trying to build something for your church, like a drum cage or a cry room or something like that. Or maybe you're just building your own home studio. Whatever it is, you've probably been doing some soundproofing research, and if that's the case, then you have definitely heard about this stuff called green glue. When I first started doing research for my studio project, it was on like every video I looked at. Everybody said you have to put the green glue between 2 sheets of drywall if you want to soundproof something. But as I did research, I started kind of doubting the claims, like how is squirting this snot in between drywall really going to make that big of a difference? And so I started doing some research and couldn't find a whole lot of criticism and started maybe thinking the hype was legit. And then I decided that I was going to do my own test. And I did a video about this, about soundproofing materials. And I'll put a little card up here or something so you can check that out. But I wanted to find out if green glue was worth the hype, but I wanted to go a little bit further than just testing the material, because when you're asking the question, is green glue worth it, you have to look at a few more things. Number one, you have to ask yourself the question, how much does this actually cost? It's pretty easy to figure out the cost per tube, but how much is this actually going to cost in your whole project? And then once we know the cost, we have to ask the second question, which is how well does this stuff actually perform? And then once we know those two things, we can kind of assess to see if it's worth it. Is the cost worth the performance? And then you have to run that alongside the third question, and that's, is there a viable alternative that can either increase cost savings or increase performance, or both? And so basically, we're going to be answering those questions today to decide whether or not green glue is really worth it. At the end of this, let me know what you think. Is green glue worth it, or is it not? Either way, I'll be letting you know what I think by the end of this video. So to answer our first question, how much does this stuff cost? I decided that I was going to make a hypothetical 8x8 wall. And I wanted to do a version that had drywall on one side and a version that had drywall on both sides of the framing, because I could see either application happening, and honestly, they both would have different results in terms of percentage. So basically, let's build this wall in our head. The first thing we need to do is come up with our frame. And I decided to base this on 2x4 framing, because that's pretty standard. I did it with top plate and a bottom plate, and then the studs at 24 on center, because that's the common way to do a soundproof wall. The extra space on center instead of a 16 on center wall means that there is less framing for sound to vibrate through, and there is also more space for insulation to do more sound control. So with our 2x4 frame, we need 7 pieces of lumber at roughly $2.97 each, which gives us a total cost for framing at $20.79. The next thing we need to do is insulate it, and I decided not to do the Safe and Sound because I don't think Safe and Sound is worth the extra cost. But if you were to use a single roll of R13 craft-faced insulation, that would cost you about $13.48 for this wall. You'd actually have a little bit left over, but that gives us a general idea. The next step is the drywall, and of course I did the 5/8 inch Type X drywall because that's pretty standard for soundproofing builds. And we would need 4 sheets of it for the single-sided because it's 2 layers of 4x8 sheets on our 8x8 wall. Each of those would be $9.88 each, which would take us to a total drywall cost of $39.52. Then we need to get ourselves some drywall screws, and I decided just to put down a pound of drywall screws. That's probably overkill for an 8x8 wall, but I think it pretty much gives us an idea. So 1 pound of drywall screws would be about $6.78. Then that brings us to the green glue, which we would need 4 tubes to put double-sided drywall on one side of the frame. And those are $16.95 each, so multiply that by 4, and you get $67.80. Then we need, of course, drywall mud, and I decided just to put a 4.5-gallon bucket of all-purpose mud in there. I figure that gives us a decent number for calculating, which is $13.28. And then we get to the paint, which I calculated for a bucket of PVA primer, a gallon of it at $11.48, and then regular paint and primer in one, I put in for $39.98 for a gallon, which brings us to a cost for paint at $51.46. Now, I know that doesn't include everything, but I think those are pretty much the basic components and gives us a good idea of what we would need to build a wall. So that takes the total cost of our wall to $213.11. And because the green glue costs $67.80 of that, that means that the green glue accounts for 32% of the total cost of the wall. That is a pretty large percentage of something to be on your wall. And so I would say then it had better do a good job if it's going to be worth it because it takes up so much. But actually it costs an even bigger percentage if you put drywall on both sides of the framing. If you do that, the whole cost for the wall actually goes up to $320.43, which is a 42% chunk of your cost. So really, if your green glue, okay, just the stuff that you spray between sheets of drywall, is going to eat up anywhere from a third to almost half of your cost, it had better perform pretty darn well. So how well does green glue perform? In order to answer that question, I decided to look on the internet and see what green glue said that they could do. And then I looked at their competitors to see what they said green glue could do. And then I looked at my own data. According to Green Glue's website, using our exact same configuration with a double 5/8" drywall, 2x4 framing, 24 on center, R13 insulation, and green glue, that if you do that, you can expect an STC rating of 52, which means roughly 52 decibels worth of reduction. So I went on Green Glue's competitor's site, Quiet Glue, to find out what they said about Green Glue when they did a comparison. And as it turns out, they did a comparison to something that Green Glue was able to get a 55 STC rating on, and Quiet Glue was almost able to match that with a 53 using Green Glue. And that tells me that basically you're splitting hairs at that point for 2 points, and that means that Green Glue is basically telling the truth. If they say they can get 55 and their competitor, who doesn't want them to do well, says they can get 53 using their product, then they're probably at least pretty close to telling the truth. But I wanted to find out how much of this is being done by the green glue and how much of this is being done by the insulation, the drywall, and the other things in that model. And so I went on stcrating.com and I actually found a very similar configuration. The only thing that's different is they don't specify whether or not it's R13 insulation. It just says it's generic batt insulation, so it can be any R rating. But they say that you can expect to find between 43 and 45 on the STC scale for that configuration, and that doesn't have green glue on it. And so that means that green glue is essentially saying they can give you a 7 to 9 point STC rating increase by using their product. And I would say that that's pretty significant if it's true. And so to answer the question, is green glue actually worth it? So far we know that it's going to increase your cost by 32 to 42%, but we also know that it seems pretty reliable that it's going to increase your performance by 7 to 9 points. So you'd have to answer the question yourself. Is green glue worth increasing your cost for that kind of a performance? But there's still the third question we need to ask, and that is there a viable alternative? And my answer to that question is absolutely there is, and it's called carpet glue. Basically, it comes down to the idea of cost and what they do. You can see here with the green glue tube, this has been, just kind of sitting around for a few days. And basically, this glue is just really, it's like it actually reminds me of GAC. From when I was a kid, like Nickelodeon sold that GAC stuff. It's just like slime. Ninja Turtles ooze, all that stuff from the 90s if you're a 90s kid. So basically, even though this is dry, it's still very tacky and flexible, okay? But this carpet glue, I opened it at the same time. You can see that this, even though it's a little bit stiffer, it's also still pretty gummy. I would say that this is more like, if you were ever sitting at a restaurant or something, you accidentally touched like a piece of gum that was stuck under the table, and it's like, oh, it's disgusting, right? It's a little dry, like it doesn't feel like it just came out of someone's mouth, but it's like flexible, and very stretchy. And this stuff is just a little bit thinner, but it's still kind of the same principle. So to me, if I have to spend $16 for one tube of this, and I need 2 tubes per sheet of drywall, or this was $6, and they have bigger buckets of this at Lowe's, and they have other brands and stuff like that at other stores, but this was the only one that they had, and it was $6 at Lowe's. And basically I'm using 75% of the container, and I'm just running it along, and it's way cheaper. So so you're spending, I don't know, maybe $5 a sheet or $32 a sheet. If you've had a chance to watch my material comparison video that I did, you would have seen that green glue and carpet glue were compared side by side along with a lot of other materials. And my findings at the end of that were that green glue didn't actually perform as well as the carpet glue. Now, if you watch the video, you may say, well, this wasn't a scientific setting in a laboratory. This was done in your garage. And that's true. And you may also notice that at least I feel like the carpet glue had a better coverage than the green glue because I used an 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch notch trowel to spread it out on there evenly. And the green glue, I just squirted it out like you would, like the manufacturer says that you should. So you might say, well, that's going to be different. That's a little bit unfair. But I will say this. The cost of carpet glue, you're looking less than $6 for a quart of this stuff, and you're spending almost $17 for a 28-ounce tube of green glue. The cost savings are significant. But how do they compare side by side? Well, if you watched that materials video, you might have noticed that what I did was I took an average decibel reduction across the frequency spectrum, and I just gave an average number. So it was like, this one reduced by 38.4 decibels on average. Well, that's not the same thing as an STC rating. I found out that that's different, and I'll probably do a video about that in the not too distant future. But what I did was I actually calculated the STC rating based on the tests in my garage to see what a difference green glue made and what a difference carpet glue made. Now, the STC numbers are going to be significantly lower than what we've been looking at because there was no insulation or anything like that. It was just strictly 2 1/2-inch sheets of drywall with green glue or carpet glue in between. But basically in that test, the green glue came back with an STC rating of 25, and the carpet glue actually came back with an STC rating of 43. Now that's a pretty significant difference, and you may look at it and go, oh, you know what? You did the testing wrong. It wasn't fair. It wasn't in a laboratory, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll tell you this. You're not going to be putting your studio together in a laboratory either. So you would expect that if green glue was that much better than carpet glue, even in a test that wasn't done perfectly, you better notice a difference, particularly if you're going to be spending 3 times as much money on that product at least. And so I think it's very important that we consider that when we think about the overall investment in what we're doing. Now, the reason I think green glue actually works isn't because they say, oh, it turns, vibrational sound energy into heat, because everything in the universe does that. I think the reason green glue works is because it stays tacky. And I think it probably helps to seal things. It creates a buffer between the drywall sheets to help prevent vibration from transferring. It does add a little bit of mass. But the truth is that carpet glue does all of those things too. The carpet glue stays tacky. If you've ever ripped up old carpet and the glue is still kind of gummy, well, that's exactly what we're working with here. It also has a decent amount of mass to it, and I think it's also going to seal up holes and stuff like that as well. I really think that carpet glue performs just as well, if not better, than green glue, and it is definitely cheaper. But there is one thing I have to say about the carpet glue, and that's that the only one that had these results was the indoor-outdoor carpet adhesive from Lowe's. I also got the general purpose flooring adhesive from Lowe's in this orange-colored can, and that stuff did not work well at all. It was a lot thinner and it dried hard, and so it just did not perform. So it's important that whatever you use be fairly thick and stay tacky long term, and that's going to be what helps you to do well in soundproofing. And so at the end of this conversation, the question is green glue really worth it? For me, absolutely not. If it was really the only product that could perform, I could see spending that much money on it. But the fact that carpet glue works as well as it does makes me think that that is the much better option. And so I hope that this was helpful. If it was, I'd ask that you'd consider liking and maybe subscribing to this channel, because this is the kind of stuff I like to talk about. And with that, I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you on the next video.